Like most typical young adults, I partied a lot, didn't see the need for spirituality. And then I was very gutted in life around 20, 21 years old, seeked some sort of wisdom. Kabbalah was my sort of last option. I remember I asked my dad one day, I was like, look, I'm completely empty. I was having anxiety attacks, I was depressed, like everything was a disaster. And he said, why don't you try Kabbalah, which is funny for somebody who grew up in the wisdom for 20 years. And one day it was a multitude of things. I started to connect to it more. I started to come to classes. I started to connect to the wisdom. Fast forward 5 years later, my life is completely transformed. Might sound cliche, but in every area, I mean, now it's obvious. It wasn't obvious to me for a few years. I'm happier, I'm more fulfilled, and I have purpose in life. And so if anything you guys take away from this 6-week course is purpose and clarity, but hopefully a lot more. And Jeff, if you want to take it from there.
Yeah, so I've been studying Kabbalah for 20 years. I've been a seeker since I was 17, so I studied a lot of the spiritual traditions, Buddhism, all the yogic traditions, TM, meditation practice, and they were all beneficial, but not until I studied Kabbalah did I really understand really the whole picture. And just like David was saying, Kabbalah really teaches us that there's a purpose, in life, in our own lives, and in the world, right? Life is not just random. I'd like to ask, because this, for me, I was a seeker, and I always used to ask myself, what's the meaning of life, since I was 17 years old, and not until I started studying Kabbalah at age 38 did I really understand the purpose. So, just show of hands, how many of you think about life, and is life random? Does life have a purpose? What's the point of life? How many of you guys think about that? Does anybody want to share what their thoughts are regarding that? Like what purpose is? I'll share for me. So for me, Kabbalah is teaching me that the purpose is everything we do in our life, right? Whether it's in our relationships, whether it's work, whether it's our children, whether it's marriage, those are all actors in life. But the real purpose of life is to completely transform and become the best version of ourselves. It's as simple as that, right? And throughout this course, we'll start to unpack that and what does that mean, and how do you go about achieving that and going through that process. Also, another thing is, religion, if all religious traditions show that, okay, there's some other being, God, that creates or controls our life. Whereas in Kabbalah, we learn that we're co-creators of our own reality. We create our own reality, right? And you see that a lot now in modern New Age spirituality, in all the books and all the Instagram posts, whether it's Louise Hay, whether it's Gabrielle Bernstein, Joe Dispenza, all these guys are amazing. They talk about the law of attraction. Really, the root of that is Kabbalah, and that's what we're going to teach here. We have the ability to control the outcome of our life.
Kabbalah, as we mentioned earlier, is not something that you have to practice religiously. It's not something that you have to go to on Saturdays or Sundays. It's a way of living and a way of being. And hopefully through the teachings and the way that we give real life examples, it'll become apparent that it's something that you can literally go home on the drive home and start to practice. And so one of the first teachings of Kabbalah, and we'll get into it a little bit more, is the thought process of the creator. As Jeff mentioned, we want to be the co-creators of our lives. For me, I can say this, and I'm sure a lot of us have experienced this, randomness effect is something that we all think about, right? We go to work one day, it's a good day, the following day is a bad day, our boss screamed at us, we had a bad day at school, our parents were angry at us. There's all these different things that come up that we perceive as random. Kabbalah teaches that there's no such thing as random. Every single one of those experiences, every one of those encounters were there to get us closer to the light of the Creator. And so the Creator is not a God or somebody in the sky that you look up to. The Creator is a being whose sole desire is to give us more fulfillment in life. And only through practicing restriction and different teachings of Kabbalah can you achieve that. But simply put, you just need to be in a state where you're ready to receive. And so that's the intention that we want to set for the evening, for the rest of the course.
But let's unpack what create your own reality means for a little bit in our own lives. So does anybody want to ask a question, give an example of this concept of create your own reality? in certain areas of your life. Like, what does create your own reality mean to you, I guess? I want to put it out there because we want to unpack it, because it's a buzzword, but it's deep, and it's the crux of what we want to talk about tonight.
You mentioned the law of attraction, so can you kind of touch, is it by becoming co-creators, same thing as the law of attraction?
Yeah.
Since I'm sure most of us are familiar with the law of attraction, can you kind of touch on that?
Yeah, so, right, a perfect example. So we want love in our life, right? We need to give love. It's as simple as that. We want sustenance in our lives, we need to give sustenance, right? Whatever we want, we need to give, right? And we need to vibrate on that same energy of what we want. We want happiness, then we need to be happy inside, no matter what. Not based on, oh, well, I made this business deal, or I found my soulmate, or I just feel good today. Even if I don't feel good today, physically, you know, this is what we're going to learn. How do we tap into that happiness inside ourselves, and then we attract happiness, right? So, does it make sense?
What's the difference between spirituality and just the 1% reality, as it's called? 1% reality is anything that is physical. We all have desires for a nice house, a fancy car, a private jet, whatever those desires are. They're all great things. We're all meant to have those things, but it can't be the premise of our lives. Oftentimes we end up in a road where we have all these desires, we manifest them, we're still left gutted and empty. And the reason for that is that life is meant to be filled with abundance and blessings, but only through first connecting through a light of the creator, it's called restriction or pause. And so I'll give an example in my life. So for many years, and since I was really young, I had a desire to make a ton of money. When I was 6 years old, I was selling candies, then I was trading baseball cards, then I was a personal trainer, and it's always been a big desire of mine. And no matter what goal I hit, it was the next goal. I was like, okay, then when I make this much money, I'll be happy. When I make this much money, I'll be happy. And every time that I got there, the emptiness was even greater. And now I started my own company a couple months ago. I haven't made $1 in the last 8 months. It all goes back to the business. There's no profit coming in, but I'm the happiest that I've ever been. And that's an example of connecting to something that's limitless, which isn't physical. I don't need the physical money in my bank account today. I'm creating something that'll last forever. And that's where my fulfillment stems from. So even if this business in 4 years from now amounts to nothing, I still won't be upset. I have lost nothing. I've only gained in these last 4 years.
You know, Kabbalistically, by 1%, we're talking about the reality that we see, right, with our five senses. But now science has caught up to spirituality. You know, the top physicists in the world talk about the same thing, that we only see 1% of reality. Where's the other 99%, right? That's beyond the five senses. That's what we're talking about. And that's what David's talking about, is accessing that other part of ourselves beyond that 1% reality that we just perceive. And that's where the lasting fulfillment comes from. 1%, like we were just saying, it's the five senses. It's the body consciousness, right? The 99%, you know, we talk about in Kabbalistic terms is we access the soul, right? You know, so it's soul consciousness, right? You know, and then Kabbalah teaches that the energy of the universe, right? We call it the light, wants to give us everything, right? We can have everything we want. We talk about co-creating. We can have everything we want. We're the only obstacles, right? We are, right? So it's all about accessing our soul, right? And moving beyond just body consciousness all the time. So we're going to get into talking about a couple tools on how we can access the soul, you know, on a daily basis, right? And so we're not just limited by, you know, the reactivity of what the five senses show us.
So as we spoke earlier, the first concept of spirituality, and specifically Kabbalah, is that we're meant to have everything. And we'll keep on going back to that because there's a big connotation with other forms of spirituality and religion that you have to suppress certain things. You can't enjoy the pleasures of life. You're meant to be up in a mountain and meditate. Kabbalah is the complete opposite. We're born in this world with the intention and the desire to receive everything. And so to Jeff's point, the light of the creator wants to give us everything. What's stopping that? Our ability to restrict. We want things right away, we go and take them, whether it's physical things, whether it's as simple as the sushi over there, I'm hungry, so I eat. There's no pause, there's no restriction, as it's called in Kabbalah. And so the way that we manifest things with lasting fulfillment, we can both experience the same thing. One of us will have a lasting experience of it, the other one will be momentary, and it'll disappear after we finish that experience or whatever that thing is. And so the concept is pause. So the next time that something comes up in your life, like I mentioned with sushi or with a nice car, with a job opportunity, pause for a moment, imagine a reality where you don't have that thing in your life, see yourself still achieving fulfillment and feeling whole without it, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job, be there in that state. And then once you're there and truly accept and embrace the reality without that thing and you still feel fulfilled, then you can go ahead and receive it. And this will carry over in any area of life, and it keeps on coming up for us. But the sole purpose that we exist in this world is to be able to restrict those things and then receive them. Most people in this world, especially when you make a ton of money, you go and spend rapidly, you're hoping that some fulfillment's gonna come from it. It never does, and it's only because the form of restriction and pause isn't there.
I look at it from my perspective in my life is instant gratification, right? Instant gratification is body consciousness, right? It's the 1%, right? And when we're stuck in that loop of instant gratification and just feeding what we want and our limited desires in the moment, then we lose the opportunity to get even more, right? And how do we get more? Again, by accessing the soul. So the only way to access the soul is to, as he says, pause and limit the instant gratification, right? So to rise above it, right? And that's what David was saying. So why don't you give an example?
Yeah.
I can give many, but let's give
examples. One reality that I experienced this week, actually, it was with an employee. And so the last couple of days, the product's just been like horrible. So it's a tech company. We onboarded a bunch of customers last week. It was the best week for the company. This week, probably all of them will drop off. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I had to get to a place where I accept the reality. When that started happening, my immediate gut reaction was, you're a moron. You told me to onboard these clients. They all onboarded. We're going to lose a couple $100,000 in revenue, and it's all because of you. And I still believe that now, but I didn't say that. And that's what pause is. So pause is not changing your mind. Pause is not seeing things in a different light. Pause is wanting to do something, wanting to be reactive towards an experience you don't like or do like, and saying, I'm going to restrict that because I know that if I do, that the situation will be resolved. In the long term, in the bigger picture, it'll all be okay. Really hard to do in practice. And again, I'm still struggling with this today, even on the drive over here, but I didn't react. And I only didn't react because I know that if I did react, one, the solution wouldn't have been solved. And two, he would have been upset. The situation probably would have gotten worse because he wouldn't have been eager to build it now or fix it. And so that's just one example.
One of my businesses, let's, for lack of better words, it's not doing so well. So it was a big domino effect that happened last week. And we got a lot of negative news, and my initial reaction was, again, to react to it. Okay, let's solve the problem. Let's put more money into it. Let's do this. Let's do that. So, I decided that I'm not going to make the decision right now. I am going to wait till I'm not reactive and upset about the situation. And this one took a few days. And then today, I came from a proactive place. I talked to my partner, and we decided, to shut down half the business and transfer some of it to another location. So, and it actually created an opportunity that this decision, like this problem that happened last week, we were already on the road to maybe having to shut down the business. But the decision we made today, not only is it going to help the short-term problem, actually the long-term prospect of the business has potential because we're going to reduce our operating costs in a significant way. And I wouldn't have seen that if this problem didn't happen a week ago. Like, I've been operating this business for 8 years. I would have never seen it. But because I didn't react to it and I waited, I got this idea last night and I introduced it today. So we're solving the short-term problem, and long-term prospects of the business has more potential. We'll see what happens, but the point is, right, to not react right away to whatever emotion you're feeling. Even let's talk about it. Let's break it down to a simple, with a friend, with a romantic partner. Somebody says something that upsets and hurts us, right? I mean, that happens every day, right? I mean, at least to me it does. Whether it's with a child, my parent, my significant other, a business associate, right? This is an easy example. It says our initial reaction is to respond to whatever hurt us immediately. Who knows what we say something we don't want to say. We make a decision that we wish we didn't make. So even if you just pause in that moment for 1 minute, it doesn't even have to be 3 days like we're talking about. 1 minute, take a deep breath, and then respond. Even 30 seconds. I mean, people give examples, right? It can be 10 seconds. Just having the consciousness.
Right?
Yeah, just having the consciousness. It's about the consciousness. Oh, wait a second. I'm not going to react to this. We were talking about creating my own reality. I'm going to create my own reality in this situation. I'm going to respond the way I want to respond. I'm not going to be controlled by how I feel about that way that person talked to me. That in alone could significantly shift whatever you're dealing with in that relationship.
Totally. I think the best way to learn are through like what's worst case scenario, what happens when we don't restrict. The most recent and probably maybe relatable thing that I can think of, a couple of years ago, I was heavily stock trading when the market was booming, and I lost a ton of money in one day. And I'm sure we've all had this experience where you're like, I need to make back what I lost, right? Like frantically. It's not like I can restrict it. I need the money now because I lost it and I don't have it now. And so I rapidly made a bunch of bad trading decisions thinking that I was going to make it back. I ended up losing it all. And that pain was unbearable for like, and it was a significant amount of money. It was the money that I saved up for like the first 21 years of my life. Very painful. Had I just paused that one day, and this is the irony of how the reality works, the market, I think it was when COVID was announced, it was like March 21st or something in 2020. The market dropped like 15% that day, so everything went to zero. Had I just, and then 3 days later, it all went back up. So if I just paused and I was like, I lost 40 grand or whatever it was, I'm gonna breathe, I'm not gonna be reactive, and started trading again 3 days later, the market was up consecutively for like 68 days. So basically whatever I would have traded, I would have made a significant, all the money that I lost plus a lot more. And so that's like a real, and I had to experience the pain of watching the market go up every day and having like 36 cents on my bank account and trying to figure out how I could convert that back to make the money that I lost. There was no way to, and then I had to work for real. But I think that's just like a really good example of a reality where if I just paused, it would have worked out and I would have been it all back. So does anybody want to share? I feel like you guys have a lot to share with us. So
Because you're describing basically to replace reaction with reflection.
Yeah, reflection and then reactivity with proactive response, right? Yes, so it's pause, reflect, and then have a proactive response. And we pause, we access the soul, and that's where all the light of, is. And the response will come without even you having to analyze and reflect and what should I say, what shouldn't say. Just by pausing alone, there's going to be the right answer. You see what I'm saying? I've experienced that. It's like you get in an argument with somebody and you just pause for a minute, the answer will come. And it's all about the energy. It's not even about what you say, right? It's about putting the positive energy into the situation, and that can change the whole dynamic. Instead of a half hour of shouting match or a fight, you change the energy and it dissipates. And I'm not saying you don't solve the problem, but then you solve the problem maybe a half hour later, but from a proactive place instead of from an emotional reactive place.
Restriction apply to like in times where you're really excited or like want to share like a win, for example.
It's a good question.
yeah.
Yes, it does.
And why?
Because if you pause for a minute, then again, the pausing is to get connect to the soul, right? The body consciousness is where the ego is, and again, ego can block you from reaching your potential.
My dad always shared with me the best, I say by nature because hopefully I passed that, but he said you have to be in a state where you're even keel. He's like, the most successful people in the world are ones that no matter what's happening around them or in their lives, it's balanced. They're never too high, they're never too low, because when you get to that state where you're so influenced by good things and by bad things, one, you're never balanced, and two, you're actually worried about the reality, which is why you get so excited. Yeah. It's like the kid that's like, Dad, look what I found, right? It's like the dad's seen that maybe 100 times, he picks up a rock from the floor, doesn't get as excited. So when you play in that world of like getting so excited about the good things that happen to you, you want the energy, you want the attention from other people around you, it's because internally you don't think that it'll last. But if you're in that balanced state where continuously good things will happen to you, you never get too excited, and then when something doesn't go your way, you're like, that's fine, next week it'll be better.
Yep.
So you want to be in that balanced place.
Through my process, it's not a restriction and pausing, it's not a black or white, right? There's some areas in our life, we call it tikkun, and we'll get into it later, but that are much more challenging than other areas of our life, right? So this is one little area that's really challenging. So it's not about 100% getting there. Just the fact that you're aware, like let's say you say something and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That alone is restriction, right? That alone is one step in the right direction, right? So I think it will help you, because otherwise it's going to be hard to succeed. Since you just said this is one of the most challenging things, just remind yourself, oh, if I can be 1% better today than I was yesterday, and I can pause a little more, and if let's say I get angry at the guy, but I get angry 10 seconds later than I did where I would have got angry in 1 second. Oh, well, look, you did 9 seconds of restriction. That's progress, because if you keep pecking away at it, that's how you grow. But if you tell yourself, oh God, you get upset at yourself because I didn't restrict, and then you're going back to square one.
The awareness around
it's the awareness around it, and just knowing that it's slowly, like by slowly, progress happens.
David. One thing when I learned about like pause, and it took me a long time to actually understand that pause is actually not about suppression, but it's about wanting more. Yes, and it's hard for like the body to understand that you have more afterwards. So I think that's a big thing to remember. Your positives, you actually want more. You don't want to settle for this little thing right now. You don't want this little of who you want infinitely more, but it's hard because your eyes don't know when it's coming. You can't really feel 5 seconds later.
And that's beautiful. That's exactly right. And that's what we were talking about before, is that, right? We were saying that we learn in Kabbalah, we were supposed to receive everything, but if we have to access our soul, right? That's where we receive everything. So when we pause, we access the soul. And yeah, so we have to remind ourselves that it's not about instant gratification that we want long-lasting fulfillment, right? I mean, let's just raise of hands. If I could, you had to choose between having something right now that's going to go away tomorrow or having fulfillment that's going to last forever, I mean, which would you choose? I mean, mostly we choose lasting fulfillment, right? So it's a game. It's a game that you're right. You don't see it. You can't. That's the whole point. That's the whole point, and not to just trust the 1% reality that we see.
Right. I think it's great to share, and I'll just reflect back to what my dad always shares with me. When you're sharing with people that are really close to you, that love you unconditionally, that don't judge you, which is very hard to find, even your closest group of friends and circle around you, and they love you, if you're doing better than them, it's going to be really hard for them to really feel happy for you. And so once you share it with them, one, you're inviting their energy into the situation. So if it hasn't fully manifested yet, if you had an application that you got in, but maybe you can be waitlisted, like there's so many things that can still happen. And so keeping that to yourself doesn't allow that energy to come in. And even if they want good for you, it might affect the outcome. So the best thing, what I do is like, there's like 3 people around me that I know without a doubt will 100% be happy for me. If they had a bad day, I can still call them and share that with them. So I still get that, because sure, you want to share the great things that happen to you, like that's normal, that's human nature. But not oversharing and just also asking yourself, am I sharing because I want them to look at me and to be like, wow, look, I'm so proud of her? Or am I sharing with them because I just love them and I want them to know and be happy for me? So it's the same thing, but a different sort of mind thought process.
And I think I'll add to that, like even just like we were talking about the pausing, even just pausing and asking yourself before you share, why do I want it? What's the intent? Why am I sharing with them? And is this the right time to share? Right? Then you'll get the answer, right? That's the restriction. Maybe you want to share in this moment, or maybe you don't want to share in that moment, you know? So it's, you know, I talk to myself a lot. That's how I do restriction. I ask myself questions, you know? I used to care, but I don't care. I mean, I do it a lot. And, you know, in business deals, like, okay, do I really want to do this deal? Is this the right time to do this deal? Is this the right person to do it with? So, you know, that's the restriction, just by talking to yourself and asking yourself the question.
That's great. Another concept we want to introduce, and maybe we'll bridge this to the end here, is the concept of surrendering. Surrendering is understanding that we don't have the ability within us to overcome certain challenges. And that's why the anxiety comes up. The anxiety is the creator tapping us on the shoulder and saying, hey, you're not meant to have this figured out. Surrender to me, surrender to the universe, if you want to call it that, and allow them or him to handle it. When you do that, then whatever the challenge that you're going through, either it'll go away by itself, either you'll find a solution to it. But it's this fixation of we need to have the solution, we need to have things figured out that cause the anxiety. When we surrender to that, I promise you, anxiety goes out the window. I was a very anxious person for many, many years. And thankfully, in the last couple of years, it's very, very hard for me to get anxious. And the only reason for that is because when things don't go my way, when I don't have clarity on things, I purely surrender. I say, if this is the worst thing that'll happen to me, I'm grateful for that. And typically, the worst case scenario never happens. But being able to see that in your mind and accept it is one of the greatest things that I've used for anxiety.
Yeah, so we were talking about like accessing the soul, right? That's where we get all the fulfillment, all the light, and we can achieve our potential. So one of them was restriction and pause, which you just talked about. The other, you know, it's a term in Kabbalah called similarity of form, right? And we touched on it in the beginning of the class with the law of attraction and creating our own reality. It's similar, but similarity of form means how can we, right? If we're like the light of the creator, then that's how we access our soul and we achieve our unlimited potential, right? And so what does that mean? We were just talking about it a little bit with what you said, right? The law of attraction, right? We want to be happy, we need to give happiness. We want love, we need to give love, right? So what is the universal energy of the life of the Creator, right? What is it? Sharing, right? It's that sharing energy, and that sharing energy, right? That can mean a lot of different things, but it's about, you know, like Brandon was saying, it's about even just moving beyond me, right? When we live a life of where everything's me, right? I mean, just think about when we're in that world of me and my problems. How does that feel energetically, right? It's heavy, the anxiety, you know, the anger, all the emotions that we don't like when we're constantly thinking about me. But when we're thinking about things beyond the me, that's the similarity of form that we're talking about, and that's where we tap into that energy and how we can connect to the soul.
When you're like the Creator, which is similarity of form, there is no anxiety. Things are natural. There's a flow to it. There's a balance. It's not sporadic highs and lows. And the only way to be in that place is by being like the Creator, which means being certain. When you're certain about life, whether things go your way or when they don't, you're completely fulfilled and happy. The uncertainty is, what do they think about me? The uncertainty is, what if the business doesn't work next month? The uncertainty is, what if the relationship falls apart? If you're certain, no matter what happens to you, you're just, I mean, you're untouchable. Life is perfect, and even if it's not, you still experience it as such.
But what you're saying, you know, it's a good question. You're saying why. You're asking why is it that way, right? Why is similarity of form help you in your life, right? So just like the example I was giving, it's an energy, right? So let's say I'm in a relationship, right? And I make it about me, right? So what I was sharing is energetically, there's anxiety, there's stress, there's anger, there's victimhood. Why is this happening to me, right? It's all about me, right? It's all about energy. So it's heavy energy. When I have similarity form and I am thinking about the other person, right? The energy flows. And when you do that, you get everything, right? You worry about making the other person happy. And when you worry, I've experienced this, when you worry about making the other person happy, you become fulfilled, right? Instead of just thinking about what they're doing for me, right? That's what David's saying, like having certainty and trust the Creator. That's trusting the system, right?
An example. I'm gonna stand up because I feel weird having way back there.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So I want to share an example. I'll share with Carissa who I met today. When I started studying Kabbalah a few months ago, immediately the next day, let me start over. I'm gonna share an example, and it kind of ties in. So I have horses. I work with horses, and I went to go buy a horse feed for my horses. I was at the cash register ringing up a big bill. Next thing you know, we hear this large car accident at the slam. It was really, really loud. So I just kind of ignored it, and everybody was like, what's going on? But I just went on with my transaction. To make a long story short, some guy comes in, he's like freaking out. He's like, I just destroyed someone's car. Whose is it? He started describing my car. And I was like, he just destroyed my car because I heard it. But I said, you know what? Pause. I'm going to pause. The owner of the store was just like, are you going to go check your car? I was just like, no, charge me. Like, I need to get my feed. It's okay, don't worry. So the guy's like shaking. He's like, I'm going to lose my job. He slammed into me with a commercial truck full of bales of alfalfa. It's a really big car. And I was like, no, just charge me. It's okay. And I told the guy, he was like shaking and stressed out. And I told him, yo, bro, like, it's okay. Don't worry. Like, my car, thank God I wasn't in it. As long as I'm not in the car, like, it's all good. So the register, I was like, can you charge me? Like, it's all good. I went on, I started asking her questions about a certain feed, and I just acted like nothing happened. I went outside and my car was just gone, and I was happy. I was like, it's okay. I called my cousin, I was like, pick me up, I need to load some feed. I acted like nothing happened. To make a long story short, the guy was just like, are you okay? He was like, you're so freaked out. He's like, my boss is gonna fire me. I called his boss, he's like, yo, don't worry. We don't even have to file an insurance claim if you don't have it. Like, it's all good. I wasn't in the car. I'm alive. I have an extra car. I live down the street. I just care about giving this feed to my animals. The owner of the company was like, so what happened? He was like pissed off at the guy who crashed me really bad. To make a long story short, the next week I go to the feed store and the owner of the company comes up to me. He's like, yo, me and my wife had a whole conversation about you, how you didn't react, how you were just so calm. He's like, we want to know, like, who are you? Like, we heard the noise. Our parking lot is full of glass. And he's like, and you just were worried about, like, a fly spray for your horse? And, like, He's like, what's going on here, you know? So to make a long story short, the owners of the company ended up like becoming close friends of mine, and then they educated me about a law where if you have goats, you don't pay sales tax. So now I spend all this money on horse feed and goat feed, and now I don't have to pay sales tax. They hook me up with discounts all the time. Like, they just became my friends, the owner of the company. So I got a lot. Kind of David mentioned, when you pause, you receive. So I received because this is a local store that I go to every week. To make a long story short, when I took the car to get repaired and all that, they said it would take like about a month. Well, that month turned into like 4 months because they had to order parts and all kind of drama, right? So I began to get very frustrated. I'm like, man, I want my car back. I went to Enterprise. They gave me like a little hatchback, and I was just in a rush that day. And I was kind of annoyed of driving a hatchback because I couldn't feed for what I do for work. I couldn't fit the stuff inside the hatchback. So I began to get very frustrated because 1 month passed by, 2 months, and all my friends were like, why do you still have that car? But then I switched my mindset, and I was like, you know what? Enterprise, which is the company that rented me the car, I was like, you know what? This is good for them. They're making money. They're about to get cashed out. So I began to just shift my perspective. I don't know if it falls into the law of similarity. So I was like, you know what? Everything is like, my problem became the solution to Enterprise. So many people got paid because of that accident. Car rental, insurance, the body shop that I took it to, the guy was so happy because he made a lot of money. You know, like everybody was just happy. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to pause. I didn't make any money on it, but I just paused. But now my relationship with the owners of this company has grown so much that I'm doing business with them. It helped my business out. I mean, it's just the most powerful thing that could have happened to me was that accident and was pausing. You know?
That's beautiful. That's a great example. I mean, you didn't make it about you, and you weren't a victim about it, and you completely changed the whole reality of the situation. That's amazing.
Once we get into prison, and we're all part of our own metaphorical prison, whether it's the fears that we have in our lives, whether it's the anxieties, whether it's the depression, we create this premise around us that doesn't allow us to see clearly. And the only way to get out of that is through connecting to the light of the Creator. And the reason why we want to end with this is, again, we mentioned many different tools and teachings throughout this class, but being in a state through all the things that we mentioned where you're literally hand in hand with the light of the Creator allows you to see negative things in your life as positive experiences. And so I'll give one personal example of a prison that I put myself in and could not get out of, and then only by connecting to the light of the Creator and practicing the things that we mentioned was I able to get out of. So I want to say maybe about 2 years ago, I developed an irrational fear. I was so afraid that when a minor thing would happen to me, like I had a cough one day, I looked up, I was like, I have tuberculosis, I have cancer, God forbid, like all these things. I was convinced that small ailments that I experienced, I think it's called hypochondria. Yes. So I had that, and it came out of nowhere. It was inexplainable, and it persisted for like every single day. I hurt my knee, I was like, I'm gonna bleed to death. You know, it was like, and it was crazy, and it was completely irrational, and it wouldn't stop. And I started to obsess over the thoughts. I'm like, if I go to this train station, I was in New York at the time, will I trip and die? Like it was nuts, right? And I couldn't make any sense of it. And I tried to like mentally, I'm like, just get out of this, dude. Like, you're nuts. Like, why are you even obsessing over this? Nothing I did worked. And then I remember there was one day I was like, you know what? If I have to live the rest of my life this way and the Creator wants me to be like this, then that's okay. People have worse things in life. If this is my worst issue, I'll accept it and it'll be what it is. The next day I woke up, I think I even got like badly hurt. I might have gotten stitches, or I forgot the exact situation. And I had zero fear. I was like, this is fine. I'll probably put like a Band-Aid on it, and I had to go to the hospital and like stitch it up. But the point is that once we let go of our experiences and perceive them as negative and invite the light of the Creator in, the worst things that we experience in life immediately go away. There's no delayment. It's not like it needs to take a week or a month or a year. The next day, you can get out of that painful reality. So if I can leave you guys with one takeaway as you're leaving here tonight, think about an area or situation in your life that you can't deal with, that feels like the end of you. Invite the light of the Creator in and accept that even if the rest of your life is going to be this way, that you fully accept and embrace it. Come back next week, you probably won't experience it. Inviting the light of the Creator in. So I'm in a situation that I don't understand, that doesn't make sense to me, that I'm afraid of. Creator, please help me. Just say those words out loud, close your eyes, meditate. It can be a minute, it can be an hour, but invite the light of the Creator in. And then 2, the next time somebody cuts you off this week, or somebody curses at you, or somebody says something you don't like, just don't react. Just say, okay, I was meant to hear that from them. Maybe there's a lesson for me there, and pause. So I would say pause and invite the light of the Creator in.